So I'm feeling a bit like Internet Explorer right now. Talking about this movie that I just saw recently this weekend when it came out. I think it was September of last year, but it was so good. I just had to talk about it. I want to talk about The Substance. In honor of the Oscars this year, I had been trying to watch all of the $5 Oscar noms that are at my local Harkins theater. And so I actually started with watching Emilia Perez, and I did want to make a video about it. But during my first watch through at Harkins, I got through the first hour and a half, and I literally left because I was like, it's kind of bad. But I will say, after I got home and watched it on Netflix, it did get better, but that's not the movie we're here to talk about today. Today, we're here to talk about The Substance. So it's actually really funny. So for this film, The Substance, I actually invited a girl from my church out to see this sort of as like a movie night. And if you haven't seen The Substance before, this may not have been the right movie for that. But I think I did make the right call, like inviting her. Like, I'm glad I was able to share this trauma with someone. Because what we're about to jump into, as you'll see, is absolutely insane. Jokes aside, there really was a lot of substance to this movie, right? I'm expecting a large round of applause from that. Because, I mean, this film talks about a lot of really interesting and, like, current, well, long time running issues within the industry, right? It talks about and the impossible beauty standards placed upon women, especially in Hollywood, to the recent trends of people doing absolutely insane things to their body to capture a bit more of their youth. I wanted to take a deep dive into this movie to take a peek at the substance. I messed up the bit. I wanted to take a deep dive into this movie to take a peek at the substance behind the substance. Boom, I think I hit it that time. Yeah. Sorry, I'm not really good at this. Yeah. Of course, spoilers. If you haven't seen this movie yet, this is your last chance to turn back. And if you haven't seen it yet, go see it. This is the perfect movie to watch with your parents, grandparents, and or for a date night. Trust me, and also comment down below. After you've watched it with them, I would love to hear about their reactions to the movie. I think, yeah. All right, now that I've hopefully successfully traumatized at least a few families, let's get right into the meat and potatoes, starting with the beauty standard in Hollywood. Sorry, I don't know why I leaned into the camera there. I was like, hello. But yeah, the meat and potatoes. Of course, the male gaze has been pervasive in television, movies, and video games, and virtually any medium that can be put on a screen, the male gaze has been a part of that, right? And this movie makes you fully aware of this, but adds an extra layer because a lot of this movie, especially early on, is our protagonist Elizabeth staring at herself in the mirror, defining herself by this sort of male gaze, pinpointing every single flaw that she has. As she's gotten older, she hates the parts of her that have started to become quote-unquote old and unattractive, the parts that have been starting to sag, the unavoidable wrinkles that come with aging, that defy any beauty routine one can bring. This point in her life happens only after she turns 50, and the evil studio producer, who looks like he came straight out of a Tiger King meets the White House reboot, cancels her show basically because she's old / not attractive / prehistoric / L / ratio, and this is really what causes her to spiral and sort of inadvertently lead her to finding this program called The Substance. So The Substance kind of draws Elizabeth in with this allure of youth and beauty. And so it doesn't take much time for her to go in and... Sorry, I never know to hold this thing. It doesn't take much time for her to go in and join this medication? Is that a good way to describe it? Medication called The Substance. Yeah, I already gave you guys the spoiler warning. So she takes the substance, and essentially she splits into two. In a very Cronenbergian, gross bathroom scene of horrors I can only hope to recreate in my own writing. She's split into two, a older-aged Elizabeth and a younger alter ego named Sue. All right, other than this male gaze aspect, and before I get a little bit further into the movie, I really want to talk about another relevant part was actually the subtle hints at the changes of beauty standards in Hollywood from the beginning and the end. Right at the beginning of the film, we're actually watching Elizabeth walk down these aisles of like posters that she's had in the past 30 years of her career, and they're all very attractive. Right, but you can tell the clothing are different. Like the clothing of the 80s that was considered scandalous is much different than the clothing of today that we consider more kind of like spicy, right? And we definitely see that really early in the beginning with Sue, because as she goes into this, she gets a casting call to try and replace her previous role. And as we go into it, we see her immediately sort of like check all of the boxes for these casting directors. She knows these casting directors have sort of a heightened sexual appetite, I guess, at least for this TV program that she's on. Or what Sue wears for her audition clearly highlights the heightened sexual appetite of the current generation. I mean, seriously, it's really all glitz and glam of the current sensationalized sort of medium landscape where everything, and I do mean everything, needs to be sexy and beautiful online to fit the part. And it's tragic because you can see Sue, again, this is Elizabeth's younger alter ego, really play into her part well, and it makes sense. Elizabeth has been part of the industry for at least 30 years, so she knows exactly what she needs to do as an actress to secure this role and put the casting directors and evil producers in awe. And the talented actress does this so well. That's another thing I need to mention about this movie is the acting is absolutely fantastic. The actresses Demi Moore and... I'm sorry, I'm blanking on her name. Margaret Qualley both did a phenomenal job in every single aspect of their performances. And I'm talking about even like the minute sort of like small actions that really made this movie what it is. Demi Moore not getting the Best Actress Oscar and losing to the actress from Anora is just so ironic considering what this film is all about. And I'm here for it. And while I'm here for it, Demi Moore, I was rooting for you, and I really hope you get cast into more things because, again, your performance was absolutely phenomenal. Sorry about the rant. I just wanted to note that the Oscars happened tonight, so I'm recording it actually right after I saw the Oscars with my family, and I just felt like I needed to throw that out there because I think the irony is insane. I was really hoping for Demi Moore, but yeah. Back to Sue playing into this like hyper-sexualized, hyper-feminine role. She knows how to absolutely play the producers of the show and get what she wants, from the way she eyes him down to the subtle lip bite. And while I was screaming at her in my head, please, this evil man does not have your best intentions in mind. She does it, and she absolutely gets what she wants, which at this time is her role back on the TV show. She wants to feel young and sexy again. And that's completely understandable given that's kind of all she's known and all she's sort of been, in a way, known for, which leads more to the tragedy of her character, but we'll get into that in just a little bit. And by just a little bit, I guess this actually plays right into the next part of the beauty that I wanted, or next part of beauty that I wanted to explore in this film, and that is sort of the concepts of pretty privilege, especially in Hollywood. I mean, it's pretty common. It's a common term that's popped up in media. But pretty privilege is essentially an unfair advantage given to people who are conventionally beautiful, opposed to those who are not. And this ranges from the minutiae of glances at a grocery store, to how people view you, and some, tragically enough, it's how people choose friends and see an inner circle. It's the outer beauty, essentially. And we see this play into how both her neighbor and one of Sue's lovers treat Sue versus Elizabeth. While she's Sue, she's treated respectfully and as a creature to be desired. However, when she's Elizabeth, she's treated mainly with anger and disgust from men. Aside from Fred, who's literally the highlight of this movie, please, men in the world, be a kind-hearted weirdo like Fred was. He's a great guy, like that guy. Aside from speaking on pretty privilege, another subject this film brought up was how we view beauty internally, and how harsh it is. While it is doubly or maybe even triply harsh for actors and actresses on how they validate their own beauty, how we validate our own beauty plays a large role in how we live our own lives. And in this movie, probably the most tragic scene is Elizabeth's date night with Fred. All right, yeah, and Elizabeth's date night with Fred. High key, this scene was one of the ones that made me believe that Demi Moore should have won the Oscar, but it's fine. Anyway, the essence of the scene is Demi is preparing for. Oh yeah, Demi Moore. Sorry. The essence of the scene is that Elizabeth is preparing for this date night with Fred, an old acquaintance from high school, homeroom of all places, who, when first meeting her after she got fired from her job, called her the most beautiful girl in the whole world. But he was like really weird about it. But how he acts is super sweet, but still in like a really weird way. But dude, okay, if an awkward girl went up to me and said that, I would probably be swooning for her. But I'm also a dude, and at this point, my bar for relationships is like lives in the same city? Question mark. But aside from my tragic dating life, yeah, in this scene, she accepts Fred's offer for a date, and he was super sweet about it. They plan the date out, and when it comes to the day of the date, she begins putting on makeup, but seeing the beauty of her younger self in the mirror behind her, she attempts to, well, almost try and match her younger self's beauty. But alas, every time she returns to the mirror, she comes up with the same conclusion that her beauty is just not enough. And upon giving up and having a little bit of a Joker moment in the mirror, she gives up and flakes on the date with Fred. And it's so tragic to see this because at this point in the film, Elizabeth really feels that because she lacks this traditional beauty, it makes her unworthy of love. And we see this later in the film. It also makes her feel unworthy of living. And I guess I'm going to jump straight into the climax from this point and talk about the Elizabeth x Sue fight. Yeah, we're just jumping into it. So I guess to start this Elizabeth x Sue fight, I'm just gonna start with a question. Have you ever wanted to kill like the worst aspects of yourself? Like, if there's a certain aspect of either your personality, body, maybe even like a minute aspect, like a weird nail or something, wouldn't you just want to like kill that part off of you, right? Well, this film does just this with its protagonist in a terrifyingly sad way. So, essentially, Sue transforms Elizabeth into a monster because she's been prolonging the transformation back to Elizabeth in an effort to close off the ugly part of herself. In this case, Sue sees Elizabeth as this disgusting part of her, both physically and metaphorically, literally gagging at the sight of her upon seeing her. And upon being forced to transform back to Elizabeth, she's realized that by prolonging switching back to being her 50-year-old self, Elizabeth has now been transformed into this Cronenbergian, like, sort of monster thing, like, very hunchback. I'll put a picture on the screen. It's absolutely insane. And Elizabeth, upon realizing the damage caused by Sue, immediately calls this substance company and asks to terminate her continuation with the program. And upon calling this substance company to terminate the program, they tell her that they'll drop off a termination kit at the pickup spot that they have for their usual medication course. And the next day, now really Cronenberg, old, dilapidated Sue hobbles out of her apartment at breakback speed to pick up that syringe from the drop box. And yeah, after that, so Sue at this point is in the bathroom, incapacitated. She drags Sue's incapacitated body out, donking her head a whole bunch of times on the couch and anything in the way, throws her in the living room, and seeing the monster that she's become, Elizabeth, Cronenberg Elizabeth, jabs the needle into Sue's chest to terminate Sue's life, essentially. But after doing so, and before she can empty the entire vial of the termination liquid, she begins to change her mind and resuscitates Sue back to life, telling her, "You need to be alive. You're the only part of me that people love." And that line cuts deep because that line cuts deep for me because the characters really feel it. Like in this moment, she so genuinely believes that her life has no worth, and it's Well, it's what we as writers and film enthusiasts would like to describe this moment as the midnight of the soul, or the dark night of the soul. And geez, it's like gutting to watch. And I mean, I'm still, even as I'm recounting it, it's hard to talk about. Anyway, she gets Sue back to life, where for the first time in the entire film, both Sue and Elizabeth are awake at the same time. And there's this fun moment where even though they are polar opposites of themselves when it comes to beauty, they mimic each other's movements for a bit as they come to consciousness with, oh my gosh, we're both awake. And Sue, looking at the evidence in Elizabeth's hand, comes to the conclusion that Elizabeth was trying to kill Sue. And in that moment, Sue snaps. Without listening to reason, she drop kicks Elizabeth with an insane power. You can tell Sue just works out 100% of the day. It's like a crazy roundhouse kick. I would not want to get into a fight with Sue. And yeah, that's absolutely insane. Okay, that little rant aside, this fight scene was really well choreographed, and it was incredible seeing this monstrous Elizabeth being knocked around like a freaking rag doll. It was absolutely insane. Eventually being obliterated by Sue, as Sue grabs Elizabeth's face and smashes it into their bathroom mirror. Again, this is another metaphor for how the perception of herself was killing her, and now it's literally killing her. As we watch her begin to, after getting her face smashed in, monster, or I guess Cronenberg Elizabeth is what I'll call her at this point in the film. Cronenberg Elizabeth crawls to the living room. And literally she's defeated at this point, and to put insult to injury, Sue runs back to the living room and then kicks the rest of the life out of her. And it's just sad. Watching this fight made me sad. We saw Sue successfully kill what Sue and Elizabeth thought was the worst part of themselves. And her imperfect version, and she had successfully cut out the worst parts, the cancerous parts of herself, and this comes at a cost. Sue, the young version of Elizabeth, Sue gets what she wants, and as per the writing guide, she's now forced to suffer as a result. And that'll lead me into the next portion of this YouTube essay rant. I don't even know what this is. I'm just kind of I'm mind blurbing at this point. But the next part is going to be the real monster and suffering. So now I'm going to deep dive into the real monster of this film. I'll give you the long and short. There actually is a monster in this film, and I'm going to call it actual monster because it's given the name Insano Monstro Eliza, right? And Sue begins to... Long and the short of it is, after Sue kills Elizabeth, Sue begins to fall apart because she's out of sustaining fluid, because the original version of her is no longer there to produce it. All right. In a panic, she's set to host the New Year's Eve show live on air. She takes the substance, the substance that split her up in the beginning, a second time. And this new Monstro Eliza Sue splits apart from Sue, becoming this even worse Cronenbergian nightmare. I thought the monster effects for Elizabeth was crazy, but Eliza Sue is a whole nother level of Cronenbergian nightmare that poops boobs out of its orifices, and has multiple faces and body parts sticking out every which way. It's nightmarishly glorious. And again, I can only hope to write of monsters just as cool as this in my own writing. I think it's absolutely sick. It's one of the reasons I'm wearing the Junji Ito shirt for the Mad Nightmare props. But yeah, okay. Yeah, glazing aside, let me jump back into what this monster is. So Eliza Sue tears up the gorgeous blue dress she was set on wearing for the New Year's Eve drop, and super glues a giant photo of Elizabeth's face from a portrait that she had in the living room. So at this point, she's this Cronin nightmare monster with a super glued giant Elizabeth face on her face. And she manages to do it. She makes it all the way to the New Year's Eve show, and begins speaking in a gurgled, distorted way about how happy she is to be there before her mask falls off and the crowd goes absolutely ballistic, saying things like "shoot the monster" and "kill it." The entire time, Monstro Elizasu is pleading with the crowd, saying, "No, it's still me, guys. It's Elizabeth. It's Sue." But the crowd doesn't listen, and attacks her on stage, swinging a microphone stand straight through her face, causing her to explode blood all over the stage and crowd before another face begins to bubble up and out of her face in another really awesome, like, it almost alluded to like the Killer Clowns in Outer Space scene when the head explodes. It's kind of, it's interesting. I really loved all the monster design. But yes, yeah. Anyway, this fight ends nowhere. She escapes out into the night. And as she's now far away from the angry crowd, she finds herself on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, where her body begins to fall apart. And eventually, Elizabeth's face falls out of the creature, and she turns into a sort of like face slug of sorts, as she inches her way further into the night, until Elizabeth finds herself at her own Hollywood star, where she stares off into the night sky of Hollywood before disintegrating until there is nothing left. The end. So yeah, that's the story. And before I jump into sort of my key takeaways, I wanted to take a moment to really appreciate the monster in this movie. I mean, as I've mentioned, it's super Cronenbergian, and it may not have been inspired by it, but Monstro Elizasu really reminds me of like the Master from the first Fallout game. Seeing its multiple faces and at times multiple voices is just so eerie and fantastic. And I'm surprised that more like sort of monster horror movies don't do this sort of effect, because it's super eerie. Not only that, the prosthetics and makeup team deserve nothing but praise bringing this character to life, giving its voices an absolutely stellar spotlight to shine on. Okay, I'm done glazing this monster. It's super cool. Please give it a watch. If you're into body horror type stuff, or like stories like from Junji Ito, or let's see, I'm trying to think of another body horror one. Yeah, Junji Ito, Color Out of Space. If you're into those movies, watch this movie. You'll absolutely love it. As I've already mentioned in the beginning, some of my takeaways of beauty in the industry and society remain true, like as I mentioned above. This is also a way of warning. I also thought this movie was a way of warning people who are using drugs to modify their body to fit into society's mold that it's dangerous. And these drugs can be steroid use for guys, and an even bigger trend right now is those sort of appetite suppressant drugs like Wegovy, stuff like that. I think for some people it can be okay, like people who really need help with that, like they're killing themselves with food. I think it's totally appropriate for them to take drugs like this, but I'm talking about people who are already really thin, taking this to become even thinner. It's very dangerous, and it's a new trend that has sort of popped up in Hollywood that's insane. And I don't know, I don't like knocking on people's choices too much, because in the end, like, the view of their own beauty is a societal issue. Like, the things that made them believe the way that they need to change is like systemically a societal issue that needs to be changed from the inside out. So I feel like it's not their fault in a sense. But yeah, this film really impacted me so much that I wanted to make a video about it. I think looking at it out of a film context, it really resonated with me, because I mean, I've had moments in my life where I thought I'm imperfect in this area, and because of that, I too am unworthy of love or unworthy of being happy. And having this mindset, as we can see from the movie, can tragically hurt us. And this movie, crazily enough, is a reminder to love yourself for who you are, and not just how the world or society wants to see you, and to live life because you deserve it. And I mean this truly from the bottom of my heart. You are way more valuable than you give yourself credit for. And I hope that even in the horror of life and in movies, that we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Sorry, I got a little preachy there at the end. But I guess I want to end this video by saying thank you all for watching. I don't make videos very often, so every view really means a lot to me. And if you made it this far into the video, that means you really wanted to see where this was going, and for that, I want to thank you. All right. See you.